Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian, who had to leave office as the Premier of New South Wales because she was under investigation from an independent commission against corruption, and she went before that ICAC back in October. Well, it has now apparently come out that there are leaked text messages talking about the current Prime Minister Scott Morrison, as a fraud and a complete psycho. They're the quotes. Now, we're going to take a look at this and have a look at the effect this might have on the upcoming federal election. And the election has to be called by no later than 21st of May this year, 2022. So we'll see how this all plays out and what effect this has. But let's take a look at what has been said, allegedly. Exclusive. 10 News First has obtained text messages between former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian, right here, and a currently serving senior minister, where Prime Minister Scott Morrison is called a fraud and a complete psycho. They're the words about the current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. A fraud and a complete psycho. Wow. All right, let's take a look at the Daily Telegraph, see what they have to say. Gladys Berejiklian allegedly called Scott Morrison a horrible person in leaked texts. Now, in a stunning private text message exchange, ex-Premier Gladys Berejiklian has allegedly described Prime Minister Scott Morrison as a horrible person she did not trust. Mr. Morrison was asked about the exchange between Miss Berejiklian and an unnamed current Liberal cabinet minister by Network 10 journalist Peter Van Onselen on Tuesday during the PM's National Press Club address. In one text message, Gladys Berejiklian reportedly described Mr. Morrison as a horrible person and went on to say she did not trust him. The text from Miss Berejiklian also said Mr. Morrison was more concerned with politics than people. The unnamed minister who replied to Miss Berejiklian went further, allegedly describing Mr. Morrison as a fraud and a complete psycho. So the unnamed minister called Morrison a fraud and a complete psycho while he was speaking to Miss Berejiklian. In a statement, she reiterated her strong support for Mr. Morrison. She did not deny making the comments, but said she had no recollection of such messages. Now, this is going to be interesting for Gladys because she still has to wait until February for the next step in her ICAC process, her Independent Commission Against Corruption process, which she went for 2 days on. Now, quickly, let's take a look at what happened. She sensationally revealed the clandestine relationship with her and Darryl Maguire, and it sparked a separate investigation into her own conduct, which resulted in her resigning as Premier on October 1st last year, which I have a video on. A month later, she spent a bruising 2 days in the witness box at the Operation Keppel public hearings, with the inquiry investigating whether she breached public trust in failing to disclose the relationship. Now, this was written on the 17th of December last year. Now, it says, the ICAC announced that Scott Robertson would take more time to prepare his arguments, with the submissions now due to relevant parties by February 15th. So she still has another couple of weeks, as it's the 1st of February right now. She still has a couple of weeks to get there and have these submissions made and maybe see what happens with ICAC. Because I think she wants to stay out of the public eye for a little bit, and then she wants to make a run for maybe a federal seat in the future. That could be a possibility. So she doesn't want this to damage her anymore. So this coming out right now, that she was calling the current Prime Minister, saying he was more concerned with politics than people, and that he was a horrible person she didn't trust. This could hurt her if Scott Morrison stays on as the Prime Minister. But as we'll see going forward, there is an election coming up very soon. And it could be, as we'll see, the end for Scott Morrison, potentially. Obviously, she put out a statement saying, strongly believe he's the best person to lead our nation for years to come. Yeah. PR spin. And this is what I was saying before. Last year, Mr. Morrison strongly backed Miss Berejiklian, who he often described as a friend, to run for the Liberals in the federal seat of Warringah, where former Prime Minister Tony Abbott ran. So she is potentially going to run for a federal seat after she is now no longer the Prime Minister of New South Wales. We're going to take a look at why this is so potentially damaging while there is an election coming up. Because if you look at the Australian two-party preferred polling right here, this is polling data from February in 2018. You've got the ALP and the Liberals are so at 48 and 52. And now you can look it up and down over the last couple of years, over the last 4 years. Here's the key dates. June 6th, 2021. Now, June 6th was when we were back up and running. As you can see, the economy was back up and running because everyone was back at work. There was not really much COVID happening. So the coalition, who's in government now, were on an uptick. And Labor, the left-wing party, was on a downturn. What happened in June is that we went back into lockdown, like a full-on hard lockdown, because as you see from here, June 26, 2021, COVID restrictions extended. So we had a bunch of restrictions going on. There was basically a massive lockdown. June 26 was announced. Now, if you look at the June 27 polling date, this is where it starts to shift. Labor starts pulling away and Liberals are on a massive downturn. So ever since we have had that big lockdown, which lasted months, Labor has just been pulling away. And now if you look at this latest one, things have gone absolutely terrible for the coalition and the right-wing government, because you had everything that's going on with Berejiklian, you had internal stoushes with premiers and the Prime Minister, and how the government has handled this whole pandemic and everything that's been going on. Look at the numbers right now. Two-party preferred, the coalition is at 44, who Gladys Berejiklian is on the side for, and could be running in a federal seat in the future, so she would want Scott Morrison to be in power. Now, they're on 44 going into this next election potentially, and Labor is up at 56. Now, there is a bit of a difference when it comes to preferred Prime Minister. It has been Scott Morrison heavily over the past, couple of years against Anthony Albanese. If you look at it, he has tightened the gap so much that right now, January 30th, which was a couple of days ago as we stand, it's at 43 to 41. It is so tight. It's within the margin of error for who Australia wants as their preferred Prime Minister. So if Scott Morrison delays this election any longer, I'm pretty sure Anthony Albanese and Labor is going to win the election. Now, polling data on the two-party preferred suggests that Labor could win this pretty easily. And also polling data on preferred Prime Minister is saying Anthony Albanese is a real chance here. You have a minority of people who are still uncommitted up until maybe even the day of the election. We'll see what happens with them. Now, this is cumulative opinion polling from a bunch of all different places. Newspoll, Roy Morgan, you get a bunch of different ones. 56 to 44 is what it's looking at right now, two-party preferred. And then on the further split, you still got the Greens at 11%, One Nation at 3%, and other parties at 11%. This is the main one we want to look at, because on the House of Reps, this is what happens. But in the Senate, it's a whole different story. Don't even get me started on the Australian Senate. That's something else. In the House of Reps, this two-party preferred is probably the main one to go off. And it's 56 to 44 as it stands, which indicates that if an election is called now, Labor will probably win that election. You can see the graphs and data here. So it's a complete uptick for Labor, complete downturn for the Liberals. And then on the primary votes, even Labor's up on the primary votes. So Scott Morrison needs to call this election as fast as possible, because things are not looking good for him and his government and what people are saying about him now. So I think if he doesn't call it now, it's going to be a nail in the coffin. And I don't think he is going to win the next election, which should be called by no later than May 21st. 2022. It's February 1st now. If he leaves it any later than March, I think he's done. But I think if he doesn't call it in the next 3 weeks, because they haven't even started campaigning, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going into this. I think he's going to leave it too late, and Labor is going to take over in the next election. Based on all this information and this polling, could change. We'll see what happens in the future. But that's where we're at with all this. The Prime Minister being called a fraud and a complete psycho, and saying that he's a horrible person that can't be trusted. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share this video out there, and I'll see you in the next one.